Offering composites.
Yes, that's what I was hinting at earlier, about Moderna being more agent and executing as well as exhibiting.
我现在明白了. But sovereign composites. I now understand Moderna's centenary proposal for a museum of their wishes. It's absolutely amazing. I know it's a very common thread, but it's definitely worth rerunning. The one about the foundation of the Moderna Musette's collection with the Museum of Our Wishes exhibition in 1962, and how this was revisited in 2006 by Lars Nitver with the Museum of Our Wishes too, to address the lack of women artists within the collection.
We see our legacy as a resource, not a burden. It's something we've been working with for a while, recursive programs. It's at root. Actually, Wish 2 was finally fulfilled in 222 with the reversion of some Dora Maar photographs. But with the emergence of self-conscious composite intelligence, addressing their wishes seemed appropriate, even necessary. And it's true, if the draft amendment is ratified, it will be an amazing achievement.
So even if you don't like the term, maybe a new golden age is beginning.
For that, we'll just have to wait and see. But earlier, you were right to suggest that in 220 with Ex Habere, the practice of exhibition, we consolidated the idea of emergent art and distributed new institutional practices.
In the Asian network, it's common knowledge that the Ex Habere reaffirmed the role of museum in civil society.
Well, to start, we uncompressed the Latinate root of exhibition, ex habere, to reveal the intention of holding out or showing evidence in a legal court. It's obvious that implicit in exhibition is the desire to show, display, and share with others. By grafting this ancient drive to desires for creative co-production, we enabled exhibitions to remain core to Moderna's aspirations. It's also true that to source, participate, co-produce, and share, to generate non-rivalrous resources, are vital to the constitution of a public domain, and indeed a civil society. There's a neat homology. Ex Habere distributed these values, and it's true, they replicated at an astonishing speed.
It's so good to be reminded. Even I tend to take the power of exhibition as a technology for granted. Do you think that this is because artists and others moved into a collaborative relationship with Moderna?
Varska Viparia. Where to start? Artists and others realized that the 19th century ideological construction of the artist had reached its absolute limit. As configured, art as a creative process had ceased to innovate, inspire, or have any critical purchase. Quite simply, it was irrelevant.
Everywhere except in the contemporary art market.
That heritage broadcast communication model of culture privileges creative exchanges between the artist and media in the studio manufactory. Exchanges which were distributed through competitive trade and collecting institutions. At best, broadcast extended a small measure of creative agency to the encounter between audiences, often referred to as passive viewers, and artworks.
Okay, I have material from composite. So, even when this model was disrupted, like in 1968, the Medallion, a model for a qualitative society exhibition at Moderna, for example, it looks like we fell back into, perhaps the wider creative ecology was just not receptive enough.
You might be right, Miss Chan. It was really when artists began to imagine art as a practice and explore creativity as a social process.
Sometimes around the late 1990s, perhaps.
Yes, then we could detect something of a change. Artists began to engage creatively with institutions and vice versa, with all aspects of institutional practice, of course through co-producing exhibitions, but also through archival projects, which you've done so much to research, Miss Chan, through organizational engagement, administration, and so on.
Okay, I'm browsing material from Composite on institutional critique, Michael Asher and Hans Hacke. They seem to be mostly artists from the Americas in the 1970s and 80s.
Not sure if those are the appropriate resources. Artists associated with institutional critique, I recall Michael Asher and Hans Hacke, also Julie Alt and Group Material, or Andrea Fraser. They had a much more antagonistic and oppositional relationship with exhibitionary institutions. They resented being represented by an exhibitionary institution, especially those linked to a 19th century ideology.
Okay, I'm now browsing material on Sputniks, EIPCP, Bruno Latour, Maria Lind, Arthur Lecoux, Van Aber Museum, Superflex, Frank Lecard, Rax and Sarai, Modernist Project, Bat de Bar?
Yes, this constellation feels more relevant. As artists rethought their practices, they recognized themselves as a nexus of complex social process, and that creativity was inherent in every conceivable transaction producing that nexus, at whatever the intensity and regardless of the scale of the assembly. The huge challenge for all of us was to attend to the lines of force, the transactions, and not be dazzled by the subjects, objects, or institutions they produced. We recall that it was under these conditions that artist practices merged with Moderna, merged into relations of mutual co-production. And so in exchange, Moderna began to think of itself as a creative institution, subject to constant critical and creative exploration.
So these were the forces generating Moderna 2 in 2012.
You're right. We simply stopped thinking of ourselves as a 19th century museum, which had to constantly expand, commission signature buildings,